Chapter 4 Arrival. "Welcome to San Francisco," announced a sign at the head of the cavernous international arrival hall. Faddy stood in the immigration line and looked around the sprawling airport in awe. 2 other planes had arrived at the same time as their Virgin Atlantic flight, and the sea of pearly grey carpet swarmed with people, all waiting to have their papers processed. "Move," ordered Noor. She pushed Faddy forward as their turn came. "Papers, please," said the immigration officer. He wore a crisp white shirt with an official seal stitched on the right sleeve. "Here you are," said Habib, handing him a large envelope. He gave Faddy a wink as the officer pulled out the pages. "You're seeking asylum, I see," the officer asked. "Yes, sir." Faddy looked at the thick pile of papers from the Consul General in Peshawar. It was the story of what had happened to them in Afghanistan and the danger Habib had faced when he'd been pressured to join the Taliban. The officer entered a series of numbers into the computer, his face serious. After what seemed like an hour of typing, he turned his attention to the pile of passports. "What's this?" he asked, pulling an American passport from the bundle. "There are 4 of you, so who is this 5th person? Mariam Nourzar?" Faddy froze, watching Habib's fingers tighten around his fraying leather briefcase. His father had mistakenly handed over Mariam's paperwork along with theirs. Noor's lips tightened into one of her perpetual frowns. She is our youngest daughter," said Habib, clearing his throat. "Where is she?" asked the officer. He peered over the edge of the desk. "She's not here," replied Habib. She was accidentally left behind in Afghanistan." "Accidentally left behind?" questioned the officer. His bushy blonde eyebrows arched upward. He glanced over the rest of the family. His sharp blue eyes paused for a moment on Faddy, who looked down at his old tennis shoes. "Yes, it was an accident," said Habib. "But authorities are looking for her. We hope to find her very soon," he added more forcefully. The officer's gaze softened. "I have 3 daughters. Couldn't imagine one of them lost all alone like that." He nodded to Safuna, who sat in a wheelchair provided by the airline, dabbing at her eyes. "God willing, she'll be found soon, Ma'am." With that, he stamped the family passports with loud thumps and sent them on their way. Faddy looked down the long hallway with bleary eyes. 5 years ago, we were on our way back to Afghanistan from the United States. Mariam was a baby, barely able to walk. A moment of anger flared through him. It's father's fault. We never should have gone back to Afghanistan in the first place when things were so bad. "Come along," said Habib, interrupting Faddy's thoughts. They followed the signs directing them towards the baggage claim. Once their small suitcases were collected from the luggage carousel, they proceeded through customs, had their luggage inspected, and then finally exited the wide double doors. A sea of eager, smiling faces bobbed around them, calling out names and waving cards with passengers' names on them. Who's coming to get us?" asked Noor, her face hidden behind a curtain of long black hair. "Your Uncle Amin," said Safuna. She leaned forward in her wheelchair to scan the crowd. Faddy had vague memories of meeting Uncle Amin when they'd returned to Kabul 5 years before. Uncle Amin was married to Faddy's mother's younger sister, Kala Niloufer. Uncle Amin was his mother's 3rd cousin or something, since Uncle Amin's mother was Safuna's father's 1st cousin. Marriages in Afghan families can be complicated like that. A jovial, smiling man, Uncle Amin had been a doctor at Kabul's main hospital. After it had been bombed during one of the many skirmishes between battling warlords, he had decided to leave the country. Kala Niloufer had repeatedly called Safuna and Madison, urging them not to return to Kabul, since they themselves were in the process of leaving. But Habib had been set on returning, convinced that refugees like Amin and Niloufer would return once the Taliban brought law and order. Within a month of Fadi's and his family's return, Uncle Amin had taken his family and his parents, Abar and Dada, across the border into Iran. For a year he'd worked in a refugee camp with an international aid organisation. From there they'd gone to London, then to the United States. Zafuna's older brother also left Afghanistan for Germany later that year, along with his wife and children. Only Mastura, Zafuna's youngest sister, remained in Kabul. Her husband had been killed in the war with the Soviets, and she and her 2 children lived with her in-laws. There he is, said Zafuna. A tall, balding man with an ample belly stood behind a woman carrying roses. He waved energetically at them. That's him, said Zafuna, a rare smile stretching her pale lips. Salam alaikum, exclaimed Uncle Amin, giving Habib a hug. Behind him lurked a boy around Fadi's age, who leaned forward to give Zafuna a kiss on the cheek. Mashallah, Zalmay, said Zafuna. You've gotten so tall and handsome. Zalmay blushed and mumbled something. Fadi, come meet your cousin, said Zafuna. Salam alaikum, said Fadi. He reached out to shake Zalmay's hand. Walaikum assalam, Zalmay responded. You have a long trip? He added in a rush. Yes, Fadi gave a weary grimace. Really long. Zalmay, help your Uncle Habib with the suitcases, said Uncle Amin. Fadi, is that you? My goodness, you were a tiny fellow when I saw you back in Kabul. And Noor, you have grown up into a young lady, no longer dashing around with pigtails and a runny nose. Noor turned red and mumbled her salams. Fadi froze. What if he asks about Mariam? Does he know? Then he remembered. His parents had called Uncle Amin from Peshawar, as they had all their relatives, to tell them what had happened. Well, let's go, said Uncle Amin, leading them towards the wide glass doors that opened onto the curbside pickup area. Wait here, and I'll bring the car around, said Uncle Amin. Half an hour later, Fadi was wedged firmly in the back seat of a beat-up Dodge Caravan. He dislodged Noor's elbow from his back and scooted closer to the door. He pressed his nose against the window, watching traffic as they exited the airport and merged onto Highway 101. So, said Habib, how is the family doing? All doing well, said Uncle Amin. Nulifa is so excited you are here. She and my mother have been cooking up a storm all day. Yes, said Zafuna from the back seat. It's been too long since I saw her. She was the best cook out of the 3 of us. I was always more interested in my studies. Well, you were first in your class, as I recall, said Uncle Amin, nodding. Your parents were so proud when you were accepted to Kabul University, especially your father, may Allah bless his soul. That seems such a long time ago now, replied Zafuna with a deep sigh. How were things in Kabul when you left? Asked Uncle Amin. We've heard that the drought this year was very bad. Very bad, said Zafuna. Low rainfall ruined this year's crops, and there have been food shortages. Many people have resorted to eating grass. Grass! Can you imagine? Uncle Amin shook his head sadly. The Taliban came with so much hope, said Habib, rubbing his red-rimmed eyes. Now fighting with the Northern Alliance has flared up. They are all the same, power-hungry and arrogant. What is the problem with people? Said Uncle Amin, his grip on the steering wheel tightening. What has happened to common decency? War, always war, grumbled Zafuna. Fadi could see she was getting more exhausted by the discussion, and he squeezed her arm. He didn't want her to get breathless and succumb to a fit of coughing. Zafuna glanced over at him with a smile and held his hand. She turned her attention back to the front. Maybe it's in our blood, said Uncle Amin with a shake of his head. Afghanistan has been invaded so many times by the Persians, Greeks, Arabs, Turks, Mongols, British, and then the Soviets. Fadi listened with half an ear. He'd heard it all before. But perhaps We are our own worst enemies, commented Habib quietly. We are always fighting, either with others or amongst ourselves. No one has defeated the Afghans, but centuries of war has left our country full of strife, one of the poorest in the world. As the adults continued their gloomy conversation and Zalmay played with a handheld video game, Fadi shrank back into the fading brown leather seat. He gazed in trepidation at the white-crested churning water of the San Francisco Bay as they headed across the San Mateo Bridge. Fascinated, Fadi pressed his nose against the glass, feeling as if he could reach out with his hand and touch the cool water. A seagull flew low over the waves, seemingly motionless, buffeted by the wind. The water below undulated in shades of blue to green to purple in some spots. Fadi thought of a book he'd read last year that he'd found at an underground bookshop, 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. He wondered what kind of creatures lurked under the shifting water. For a moment, Fadi felt queasy, a little seasick. They were travelling awfully close to the water. Afghanistan was landlocked, with the nearest coast lying along the Arabian Sea 300 miles to the south. Even when he was young in Wisconsin, Fadi had never seen the ocean. This was the first time he'd been this close to so much water. A gazillion gallons of shimmering water flowed beneath them. Mariam would have loved it.